Now, let us begin today. What a great honor for me to be here today. The whole topics about the speech today is going to be centering around the concepts of globalizations and digital connectivity. Now, before I move on to the topics of globalization, the reason for this thing is that I have a mission today to try to make you believe that such a big words like globalization is certainly not far from you. It has got every single thing to do with you today, your future, and the future that's going to concern your family. Now let's begin. A show of hands, how many of us here have heard of the word Brexit? Okay, not too bad. I can see that maybe about 1/3 of us here. Now, the Brexit referendum actually took place back in June 23rd this year. And the people of the United Kingdom, they were asked to make a decision. A pretty unconventional decision, because if you were to check onto the histories of mankind, you don't have national referendum happening all the time. So the decision was whether they would remain in European Union. Now, the results would have shown that more than half of the population, in fact, 52% of the people, voted to leave European Union in a binding mandate, and that ended the first part of a saga that began way back in 1975. And finally, resulted in the resignations of British Prime Minister David Cameron. In fact, I met the Prime Minister 2 years earlier before he resigned. I should have asked for his signature, knowing that he was going to resign. Yep. And of course, the world that we're living in today, following the Brexit word, many pundits, creative pundits around the world, started commenting and speculating that there would be more such words coming through into the future. And it would seem that everyone is actually rushing towards the exit door. You have Brexit, you have Grexit, you have eaten leave, finish. And it appears that in the entire EU, the only country that was about to remain was Romania. Now, well, jokes aside, I believe the real questions that really concern us today, that is highly relevant to us today, is this. Why did the British decide to leave the European Union? Well, I suppose this is not a simple question, such as why did the chicken wanted to cross the road? Nobody's laughing. My goodness, which century are you from? Why did the chicken cross the road? They didn't teach you in Inti? Anyway, well, I wish things were that simple in our real world today. If we were to go back to the very beginnings of this year, before the war was actually taking place. Now, according to a poll done by a public opinion research company, authoritative and a famous one, before the war was taking place, the main reasons that were quoted, that were identified as the reasons why the UK had to leave the European Union were immigrations, economics-related issues, sovereignty, and even safety from terrorism. Now, as you can see from the chart, there were in fact 9 main reasons that the experts thought that would actually influence the decision. And it is really a pity that they didn't get them right at all. For Brexit, it was not simply about immigration control or the UK claiming that they have not been getting a fair deal from the European Union. The reason was actually very simple. There appears to be a major fault line in contemporary politics between those that embrace globalizations and those that fear globalizations. But that fear, as we all know that all the time we have fear for things that are unknown, things that we are not familiar with, and things that probably have brought bad memories or history from the past. Such fear will not impede decades of momentum towards a flatter and more globalized world. Which explains today, if any one of you here were to take out your mobile phone and if you start searching for the words, the combination words of Brexit and globalizations, you would still have a 500,000 hits for that matter. So the bottom line is simply this. Nations today can no longer create laws and treaties that relies upon self-protectionism for self-preservation. Well, indeed a very bold statement. Can I use the word dare? Well, I suppose, why am I making such a bold statement right now? Well, simply because the world that we are seeing today, the world that we're living in today is much more connected than before. If we were to look at some numbers, if we were to look back in 1990, the total values of the global flows of goods, services, and finance amounted to about $5 trillion US dollars, and probably about 24% or 1/4 of the global GDP. Now, if we fast forward that to the year 2014, you realize that the number has actually grown 6 times to about $30 trillion worth of goods, finances, and services, or equivalent to 39% of the total GDP. Take a pause. What you're seeing right now is that this is year 2014. Every single dollar that's changing place within the world in the context of global GDP, in fact, 40% of it are actually foreign exchange related. Now, if we were to study closely, the growth of 6 times over the spans of time that we talk about, it wasn't the conventional trade and finance that have actually contributed to such growth of globalizations. These 2 sectors that characterize the 20th century's economy have either flattened or even declined since the year 2008, where the world suffered from one of the greatest downfall in economy. Instead, history would have told us that digital flows was growing in such a soaring manner. Now just look at the amount of cross-border bandwidth that was used then. It actually has grown 45 times, the data flows 45 times from 1980 to 2014. And that category itself became a significant category, accounted to more than $2.8 trillion of the global GDP increase just from 2005 to 2014. Globalization was becoming more digital in that sense. Again, what has all of this to do with people like you and me? So these globalizations, what has all these things got to do with people like you and me? You see, the shift towards a more digital form of globalizations has changed the way that people, nations, interact with one another, and therefore affects every single aspect of globalization as well defined by the IMF. The 4 basic aspects of globalization, be it trade and transactions, capital and investment movements, migrations and the movements of people, and the disseminations of knowledge, are all altered by digital globalizations. The real consequences of such an impact actually hit much more closer at home than we imagine and affects every one of us profoundly, but without people realizing it. All of us here today, you and me, are experiencing the largest cluster movements of our time, and we call that digital globalizations, which is actually shaping our world in a most unimaginable, unaccountable ways. I've seen how digitalizations has transformed a backward third world countries just in under a decade in China to where China is today. Well, it certainly brings imaginable, uncomfortable levels of disruptions and changes. And as I say earlier, it is not just relevant to countries and governments, but to every single individual. If you were to look at it in a more graphic manner, look at this chart, how the world has changed over the last 16 years. In 2016, the world's largest enterprises, I'm sure some of these brand names of companies will be familiar to you. In 2016, the world's largest enterprises, in terms of market cap, are now all digital companies, displacing enterprises that are more traditional. Today, such companies are digital by nature, they are born digital, and they were born global in destiny. See, one of the direct impacts of digital reform in globalization hits right in the job market, the market that was going to concern all of us here. And I'm so happy that when the CEO of Intel University talks about us having the ability to generate 97% of employability postgraduates. Having a job is actually something that's bugging a lot of people. I have a son that's 21 years old, and he's going to be jumping into the job market next year. And some of the parents are concerned about whether the degrees that you have obtained from the Ivy League, private or public institutions in the world, were it enough job competencies, the characteristics as required for future employment, and how the values of jobs, how jobs are going to be redefined in the future, how organizations is going to be revamped in the future, and in fact, how industries is going to be reorganized in the future. If we were to look at some research by Oxford University, for example, 47% of the entire US employment market is at risk of being automated over the next 2 decades. In other words, you are not only facing competition from the man or the lady sitting next to you, you will be facing competition from the machines, the artificial intelligence of the world that again is taking place so rapidly. Well, another research done by, it says that about 65% of the children entering primary school today will ultimately work in a new job environment, a new job types and functions that doesn't even exist today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in my business, we talk a lot about internet data, big data, and all that. We talk a lot about metrics. We use them almost every single day in measuring most of the things, data flows, human behaviors, and whatnot. But however, I realize today that every one of you sitting here today is not simply a number. You are people, real people. You have hopes, you have aspirations, and you have dreams. And I believe in you, and I want you to believe in you. That's the reasons why I travel thousands of miles today to meet with you. I want you to believe that each of you can be a dream makers of tomorrow. Yes, granted that whatever bad news that you might heard about globalizations, most in fact can be beneficial. And of course, some of the areas might be less so. We all live in the different eras. We have our challenges. And I'm sure my parents, my mom is here, people have different challenges. But I guess one thing that is certain is that the world will change significantly with or without you. And I suppose the most provocative question that we must ask ourselves today would be, how is the best way for us to equip ourselves to not only stand up to, but also excel in such a rapidly changing world? And I guess that's the reason why you're here today. Now, let us begin. The best way for us to really take advantage of a globalized world is to become a global citizen. And how do you do that? I'm going to try maybe about 5 or 6 ideas here. We call it the pathways based on the observations and the experience that I've had from outside Malaysia, China mainly, and I'm very actively involved in some of the policy settings of institutions in the US. For Harvard Business School, I sit in a global advisory board, and I talk to a lot of academias, business leaders from the West, and every one of us are equally concerned about when the world is getting more globalized, the human capital that we are facing today, are we equipped enough to face such potential possibilities and opportunities? Well, we're not looking at just challenges, but you look at it as possibilities and opportunities. In my humble opinion, I hope might be relevant to you today. First of all, globalizations, global citizens rejects extremism. Before I elaborate on the rejection's ideas of extremism, let me preface my remarks by pointing out that becoming a global citizen, first of all, requires an open mind. It sounds very simple, open mind, but how many of us here can really do that? It doesn't sound like a huge challenge to you, but do bear in mind that this world that we are living in today is highly connected, where data is free-flowing, with more and more people contributing to the formations of new knowledge, where you don't only learn from books, you learn from your mobile phone more than anything else via online socializations. So there is a high likelihood that you might have biases, prejudice that you don't even know that you have. How can we get rid of something that we don't even know that we have? How do you know that you don't know? How do I know something that I don't know? See, without an open mind, how can we see what should be improved or what should be changed? The worst prison in the world is not one with walls and fences. The worst prison is one without bars or barriers. Without those visible structures, we don't realize that we are being imprisoned. It is the same way with our beliefs, our value systems, and at times misguided by ideas such as nationalistic, patriotic, secular thinkings and all that. We believe what we are told unless our minds are open enough, independent enough to dig deeper into the truth. Do you honestly believe that that signature moved from point A to point B? How many of you believe that? You did? Do you really believe in that? How can we choose the right path if we don't even realize that a path exists? Because from point A to point B, that path doesn't exist. If you were to transfer your thinking pattern into all the things that you see surrounding your world, a lot of us here actually are close-minded than we thought. See, due to the driving mega forces of globalization in the digital age, global competition is no longer defined by national boundaries, and the rules of governing and formations of economic laws around the world are no longer based on a zero-sum game. Yet, the Brexit has actually taught us that nations can no longer rely upon protectionism, as I said earlier, for self-preservation. However, it also given rise to many so-called champions of patriotism who in fact have hidden and self-serving agendas, and who make protectionist comments and speeches that are bound to be heard in this world flooded with social media. Selectively, all of us are more easily attracted to extreme ideas than something that is mundane and calm, which is why in the world of journalism, when the world is peaceful, this business go out of business. There's no bad news because everybody look for bad news, as if that 天下无大事会大乱. Experience tells us that these people shall not escape the ultimate judgments of history. But the real question becomes, you and I are living here today, how do you determine what is truth and what are sugar-coated lies right now? A global mindset begins with an open mind, and having an open mind is the first line of defense against falsehood. None of us here is going to talk about nation building. None of us here is going to talk about politics. None of us here is going to talk about economics and whatnot. Let's talk about your job, because this is what's really, really important to 1/3 of the people here, because this 1/3 of the people here is going to depend on the other 1/3 of the people that pay the school fees. Parents are here today. And the other 1/3 of the people who are professors are going to depend on this 1/3 of people that pay the school fees so that they get salary. So all of us are affected in that sense. Now, I have traveled to almost every continent of the world and realized that the earth that we are living in today are not only a big place, but also a very diverse and differentiated places with people with all sorts of different ideas. You cannot imagine how people would think in Brazil. You cannot imagine how people would think in Prague until you really go and live with them, talk with them. Now, if any one of us here were to travel, I would encourage that you use Airbnb rather than booking a hotel, because when you use Airbnb or you use Uber for that matter, you really get into the dialogues with those people from that domestic countries. Now, having said that, being global also doesn't mean that you have to be physically present in more places. More so about having the ability to transport your mind into the external world and see things the way that they are perceived in different parts of the world. The key is simply this: to exert a conscious effort and take the initiative to get out of your comfort zone, to experience the unconventional, to see and recognize the differences that exist among people. Peoples of different colors, people of different races, people of different continents. The world eventually is a global village. And to be a champion of moderation whom is genuinely attuned to the powers of the world. But I know this is not an easy path. For extremist messages and ideas are simple, easy to absorb, and requires little thought. And it is one reason why they become so popular over the internet. Well, open-mindedness, on the other hand, is much more demanding, as it requires critical thinking, critical analysis, and the willingness to really dig deeper into the connective areas of your mind, and sometimes even question yourself. A global mindset is the inverse of extremism. Now, let me reiterate today that the biggest enemies of mankind and the stumbling blocks that we are facing towards the progress of our civilization lies nothing but in the forms of extremism of any kind, from anywhere. You, young people that are sitting in this auditorium today, you are the new generations, and you must wake up and help all of us to shape a better future, to prevent future generations from becoming too ethnocentric. Ethnocentricity is the keywords that I learned from UKM when I was a student over there. And you shouldn't be too xenophobic or simply intolerant of other systems. Worst of all, people that behave in such a manner under the umbrellas of being patriotic is misguided and will only lead to more isolations and eventually self-destructions. Now that's the first part about being open-minded. You want to talk about globalizations? You don't have to travel. You don't have to just study economics. The first thing is, in your day-to-day interactions with people from different backgrounds, people from different social groups, do you have an open mind to see things differently? Now, the second pathways that a global citizens would require to have, I would say that we all have to learn to be the masters of technology. Now, in today's world, there are those of us who still like to bury our heads in the sand and deny that the age of technology is upon us. Well, it is actually a fruitless effort, because if you were to just take a look around you, technology pervades all aspects of our lives, and it is becoming the crux of everything that we are living in today. The influence and significance of technology will not diminish, but I can assure you that it would only penetrate further and further in our lives. 10 years ago, when I was fortunate to be recruited as part of the management team in Tencent, we have like 2,600 people. 10 years later, today we have close to 40,000 people. 10 years ago, we have one single product which all the Chinese users are using called QQ. And today, we have countless numbers of products. QQ, today, we have more than a billion monthly active users. Tencent News, which is one of my biggest products today, every single day, we have more than 60 million people in every single minute using Tencent News. Tencent Video, something like Netflix, every single day we have more than 100 million people using Tencent Video in replacement to television. And today, every single netizens in China would actually make payment via Alipay or WeChat payment without actually walking around with cash. See, all these are just small snapshots about how digitalizations and technologies are actually impacting our lives in a market such as China. And that influence is going to slowly grow all the way around to the world. It's not because of the Chinese-ness of it, but it's because of the universal utilities that human beings can derive from technology. So therefore, the ideas of deniers, the ideas of evasions are totally not an option. The message that must be heard today about modern technology is don't evade, embrace. The key is this: we cannot simply exist in a technological world. You know, some of the examples that some scholars actually brought to us when we have such intellectual discussions. Mankind has gone through different parts of industrial revolutions. Industrial Revolution 1, 2, 3, and some say this is 4th. And if you wanted to drink milk, you don't have to farm a cow farm. So in other words, you can let somebody else. If you want to drive an automobile today, you don't have to know how to build a car. See, that's the idea that people say, well, technology, you can have the smartest of the Steve Jobs of the world. They would invent iPhones. We would just use iPhone. They would invent this. We would just use this. I'm saying this is no longer enough, because if we're going to I'm referring to the youngsters, the young students are sitting behind. If we are simply going to be just the one that's waiting for iPhone 7, iPhone 8, no longer enough, because you simply just exist in a technological world. We should learn how to live fulfilling our lives, our dreams by using technology to our advantage. Every one of us can benefit from the technologically driven world of the near future. So get ready and embrace such opportunities. The question then, of course, you're going to ask is that how do you best exploit technology to our advantage? Now, first of all, if you can, and I hope Inti offers this, if you can, you really got to speak the language of technology. And that language is coding. It's coding. Language is about understanding. And the use of code is how we get machines to understand what is it that we want them to do. Tencent, we're going to have our new building launched in next year. And this will probably be one of the most advanced building with artificial intelligence, a building that can think, a building that knows what time you arrive in the office, a building that knows how many hours you spend in the toilet, a building that knows what sort of food you order from your canteen, and a building that knows that, hey, Mr. Lau, your BMI has just reached 35, so stop eating that gai fan. Well, all this sounds very futuristic, right? It is not. It's happening today. Our buildings will be embedded with all the so-called artificial intelligence systems where every single car of our employees, when they drive onto the parking lot, that computer system will guide you to the closest parking lot, and then the computer system via WeChat or QQ would know your full day itinerary and then guide you to the closest office or conference room. And if your body temperature reaches like more than 37.9, and they just found out you just came back from Brazil, an ambulance is standby. You think about how such things can happen. Now, I cannot overemphasize the point that coding will be the new lingua franca that enables communications on a global level. But communications without understanding the context of the communication is insufficient. The pervasive nature of technology, the inevitable disruptions that it spawns, requires a deeper understanding and masteries of the language if we truly want to be successful. You know, gentlemen, those that sit at the back, you're 20 years old, 22, 1 or 2 years old, success is a big burden. It's like a big sumo wrestler resting on your shoulder. I can understand that because I have a son that's 20 years old, almost about 21 years old. I can understand that. But all we are saying is that if you have a little bit of time, learn coding. It's just like 30 years ago, my father told me, "Asing, you must learn English." 30 years ago, we have to be good in English. We have to be good in Bahasa, because languages, those are exam papers. 30 years ago, I have to go and learn Chinese because my father said, Chinese must learn Chinese. But today is beyond that. It's beyond that. You have to be good in Bahasa, you have to be good in your mother tongues if that's important to you, but more importantly, English and coding. Because if you don't understand coding, 1/3 of your future opportunities is shut for you. And of course, you can say that, well, I'm multi-rich, I can buy iPhone without understanding how it works. But you lose out the opportunities. If any one of us here had that sort of a thinking just now, that's a trick. I know exactly which finger has done what, See, living becomes so multi-dimensional. You're not just living now, getting fed with what other people want you to believe in. This is just a magician playing a trick. What if some politicians, what if some bosses in the future, what if some competitors in the future are playing the same magic tricks on you and you're going to lose out? Learning coding is only a useful first step in our quest to become masters of technologies. Now, the next question, if we were to dig deeper, would be, how do we become masters of technology? How can people who haven't studied engineering or computer scientists stand a chance in the world of the future? Now, this is where Harvard comes in, because Harvard says that the technical majors accounts for 34% of the entire graduates that they produce every single year. And in Oxford, 31%, and 34% at Cambridge. So the point I'm trying to make is that, hey, guys, don't worry, you're not far behind, because these best places in the world, only 1/3 of the guys are computer and engineer scientists. The other remaining 70% are equally dead like you. Am I saying that? No. No. The rest of us with non-technological majors, are we then irrelevant to the future? The knowledge of coding is, as we have said, an important foundation. If you learn it, well and good. But in order to build up the structures of masteries of technology, what is even more important is that you must learn to look at the world in the same way that scientists examine everything, in order to cultivate the ability to engage in the deeper portions of conversations. You really got to think deep. The scientific mindset that I'm talking about has got 2 key characteristics. Number 1, you almost have to be perpetually curious. You really have to be curious. You really have to ask, why? Why like that? Why not like that? When I was like 6, 7 years old, we said, why like that? Not my mother, not my mother, she's sitting there. Why like that? Now, if you don't ask why like that, you lose out. You almost have to encourage your children. You almost have to encourage yourself. Sorry, professor, it's a very difficult life for you. You almost really have to ask, because great professors, they ask themselves the same question all the time. Knowledge is becoming so irrelevant from, nowadays I don't buy books anymore, because I find that books are just keep repeating things from the past. What you could learn from Wikipedia, from the internet, or buy books that are published this year, not even last year. Buy books that are published last week, last month. Because the moment it's being published, somebody else is going to revamp it. Things are changed. So perpetually curious, always digging deeper, always ask why and why again, and strive to understand a big picture in any single environment or scenario you might be in. Now, the second characteristics would be a mindset that I would advocate of a scientist is actually trying to go back to school and learn about these things called empirical methods. Don't trust mere theories or hearsay for that matter, or even logic. Trust but verify. It's a culture that, who taught us this? The greatest CEOs of the world, Jack Welch. When he came to China, we were exchanging our experiences and our thoughts. And of course, he was like a legend. He's probably about 80 years old today. And there you are, we all young guys. Actually not that young anyway. So trying to what do we learn in all that? Because one of the gurus from the West, when he came to one of the functions in Tencent, he said these beautiful words, which I still remember today because I feel a lot of pride in us and my team because we contributed towards that. And this is what he said. He said, when I came to China and I thought I was here to see the past, and I soon realized this is the future. When I came to China, I thought I was here to see the past. He thought he's going to see the Great Wars, And then he soon realized this is the future. You see, a great man could quickly turn and then keep asking why, asking empirical questions to trust and verify. The developments of scientific mindsets is so crucial because it's going to lead to the next level of technological revolution. Our students in Malaysia, not really students in Malaysia, for our friends that are not within the IT circle, naturally would be not very close to such area. One of the biggest things that the world is going to be facing very quickly is the explosions of the utilities of artificial intelligence. How many of us here watched the game between AlphaGo, Wei Qi, and the chess champion from Korea? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 out of 800? Think about it. And I hope all of you students, please go and search up what is AlphaGo, Alpha, Beta, Go, and think about the impacts of, okay, cut a long story short. Machine is actually programmed by human being. We have a team of Google top engineers that's based in the UK that work day in and day out teaching the machines on how to play chess. They have input 35 million steps. 35 million steps into the computer. Teaching the computer, say, okay, if he move like that, then you move like that. If he move like that, then you move like that. 35 million steps was being programmed into the machine. There you are, the big day came. The world champions of chess, represented by human species and the machine. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. And then came the 37 move. The 37 move, when the machine tick, the guy went tock. Because the guy said, this is impossible. And all of us who were watching from Tencent, all of us cannot be. Because machine would not do that. And what it basically means is this machine suddenly has a mind of itself. This machine suddenly be so intuitive, a machine was making a decision for himself. Because that man says that I know machine, so I'm going to move this, and I know that you're going to move that. But the machine said, hoo, you think I stupid? So move that side. That's the 37 move. It's just not about chess. A lot of great innovations in the world are coming from the world of games. Think about one fine day where an automobile, you can Uber, you can grab a taxi and all that. But what if one fine day you just press a button? There's I don't even know whether you should call it a car anymore. This little thing that's arrived, and then you go up, and then you take a newspaper and you read, and this little thing will just move along the way. You switch the air cons on for your house, and you'll find the easiest way and all that. 2 years ago, if I were to share this story to you, I think it's science fiction. But today, after what AlphaGo has done, I think that fiction world is very soon is going to be non-fiction. You're going to be living in such a world, and what you're going to do about it. So the key points here, I suppose, are every one of us stand a chance to benefit from this technologically driven, dominated world in the future if we firstly choose to embrace it. You can choose to embrace it whatever you want, but you got to find a way to live with technology. Living in technology doesn't mean, okay, I wait for the latest iPhone 7, somebody's going to buy for me. No. You got to find a way to live beyond that. Technology shouldn't be something that passes you by. You have to be part of that technological process that you're going to ask yourself, what advantage are you going to make for technology to make it better to you? Number two, if you're an engineer, well and good, congratulations. But holding an engineering degree alone is not going to guarantee your success in the future. Those who have scientific mindset, those who are passionate about unleashing the imaginations of technology, those will be those that stand a much better chance in participating in the development of a future that will be more technology-driven on the surface, but more humane at the core. Technology is only an enabler to make more humanity values. And in the histories, if you were to think about the Da Vinci's of the world, the Leonardo's of the world, they are not only, algorithm is another big word today. Do you know that algorithms came from the name of an Islamic scholar? Today that, artificial intelligence, immersive machine learning, deep learning, facial recognition, all these things go back to algorithm. And the person that invented algorithm was an Islamic scholar. So technology, don't think that technology, nothing to do with you. Technology will help you or it will sink you. Now, moving on to the third pathways, if I liked, about global citizens. I think global citizens, I'm hoping that all of us would grow up to be leaders of integrity. I'm not talking about Mr. Tan not telling me 37 students, No, I'm not talking about that. Yep. Well, it was a very serious session, right? Now, let's have a bit of fun here. Now, how many of us here have iPhone? iPhones, okay. iPhone 7? I got iPhone 7, iPhone 7. No difference, only behind got 2 cameras. After that, no difference. Now, let's do an experiment. Now, I would like you to take out your iPhone. Show me your iPhone. Magic, magic. Show me your iPhone. Okay. Now, take out your iPhone and go to the setting button. Go to the setting button. You done it? Okay, setting button. And then scroll all the way down until you see the privacy button. Okay? Now, click on it. Privacy button, the one with the hands. Click on it, okay? Now, then, once you are in the privacy button, you click on the location service. You see, location service? Now, then scroll all the way down until you see the last button that says System Services. The last button, okay? System Services. All right? Now, click on that, and then again scroll down until you see frequent locations. Okay? Now you click on it, there you are. Click, there you are. These are all the historical records that you have been for the past 1 week. Oh, don't show the person next to you. Or... Now click on it again. One more click. One more click. This is where you have been. This is what you have done and all that. It's a very detailed record of what you have done in the past how many hours. Now, we are indeed living in the world of digitalization, and which actually means that more data will be shared willingly or unknowingly via the internet. I always wonder if one fine day, these things can actually record what I speak as I walk, as I sleep. And then somebody will get all these, verbal languages and turn into computer coding, and then they do a psychographic analysis about myself. I don't know, maybe somebody is doing that already. Now, in other words, you can run, but you certainly cannot hide. We are faced with explosions of information, and therefore, the question that it raises is simply this. With more information that you know about the others, how do you determine what is right and what is wrong in the world of social media and big data? Now, you're going to be a leader somewhere. If one fine day you are entrusted with so much of information, and how do we know whether we can trust you? What are you going to do with that information? How do you sort through the clutters of a forest trees of information and still be able to hold on tight, making that morally right decisions and judgments? Mind you, data in itself is immoral. How do we prevent people from using data for what society considers immoral purposes? As future leaders, you will be faced with this simple dilemma: the difference between what to think and how to think. Now, I'm sure many of us here, those of us who aspire to be future leaders, we must begin early in life to develop a moral compass that will guide us through the right course. And that moral compass is leading a life of integrity. Integrity in the leader is a two-sided coin. On one hand, it is not doing something wrong. That's not difficult. But for leaders, this is actually particularly important because you are always being observed. And more importantly, you will be example. You are emulated by the youngsters, your followers. And the other side of the coin is to perhaps actively trying to do good for the society. And this is actually far more difficult than the other sides of the coin. Always remember that the only thing necessary for the triumphs of evil is for good men to do nothing. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Youngsters that are sitting behind, those in approaching the 20s, because you will be the future. Therefore, how do you refrain from allowing the misuse of data and technology, and also vigorously pursue the proper use of data and technology for the sake of those that depend on us? At Tencent, this sounds like advertisement, but it's true. The integrities of our people is our most important values and asset, and one that we never compromise. I live in this country, I live in this company for 11 years out of 18 years of the company. We are 18 years old today, out of which I have got 11 years of participation. And I can stand with my own feet to say proudly that this is a company that truly believes in integrity. We fire people for wrongdoing. We fire people for corruptions. We fire people for not being truthful and all that. Because if you lose this moral compass in the leaderships of the company, you are creating a future inconvenience of the society. The larger you become, it's cancerous in a sense. Well, in China, unfortunately, there's a well-known concept called the gray area. You know gray area? The white and the black in between is gray area. Gray area is the areas that thou shalt not get caught until you're caught. Yeah. Many talented people fall off the cliff of the gray area. I personally was involved in putting my colleagues, my VPs into jail because of the gray area. We put people in jail. VPs, people in jail. And such people certainly fall from grace. Very unfortunate. Unfortunately, when they thought that they could make morally questionable decisions and never be held accountable and face any consequences. Don't ever think that the long arms of the law will never catch up with you. We know what to do. Now, the fourth pathways, if I may, when we talk about global citizens, this is interesting because we talk that global citizens have to learn to collaborate more rather than to compete. All schooling systems, since day one and all that, were actually teaching us to compete, the survival of the fittest. But I'm glad to see that the syllabus have changed. The philosophy of education has evolved. It's no longer just about competition. What it basically means is that in the world of globalization, the traditional economic sector will be transformed into a sharing economy. Today, industries are increasingly segmentized and no company can stand alone. While we might be the largest market cap in Asia, Tencent as a company, but we do rely a lot on our partners, the downstreams and the upstreams, towards the establishments and the growth of an ecosystem. Ecosystem is important. And every company has its unique strengths in the specific area, segments, and which at the same time, it must learn to collaborate both upstreams and downstream. And when one finds that you become one of the key members of such companies, what role can you play in pushing the envelopes for corporations and other different types of platforms? So therefore, it is the ability to make full use of the core strengths of your platform companies that actually creates values in a much broader sense. And I previously mentioned about the cloud, artificial intelligence. One of the key things is cloud computing will be something that's befalling us in a very fast manner. Cloud actually enables resources that was once localized and it will be used much more as utilities, as resources and delivered to the mass. Now, this has actually promoted the developments of sharing economy, the cloud computing and cloud computers. The sharing economy, in turn, would then drive the rapid rise of what we call unicorns in recent years, such as Uber, Didi, and Airbnb. These companies actually came from the results of a cloud-driven environment. The resources of businesses and individuals can be put in the cloud, sharing them with other businesses and individuals that need those resources. In the past, I remember when I worked back in the early 90s, you protect your data, you protect your information. But now informations are up for sharing. What sort of mindset is that? So perhaps forget about the conventional leadership qualities or the leadership thoughts. leadership models focus on individuals' achievements. Learn to be a better team player, because collaboration is now far more important than you think. The sharing economy has given us a new types of ecosystem, and it goes beyond the business model based on defeating your enemy. You know, Tencent today, when one day our stock became the largest in Asia, that's a day that we became very uneasy, because the idea is really not about becoming number one. The idea is to really move the industry together and you raise a bar together. I believe that it's actually best to nurture. While we have competitions, it's actually better to nurture your competitions and keep them close, and hopefully you then stand a better chance in leadership in creating a win-win outcomes for all. So what I'm saying about cloud is simply this. Focus on the characteristics of the sharing economy. No one tribe will be more superior than the other. We all need one another together. And the goal is no longer just about taking a biggest piece of pie from your competitions or your enemy, but the new goal is actually learning to enlarge the pie of prosperity so that real progress can actually occur globally. Now, finally, the last pathways of the day. Global citizens embrace authentic city, authentic self. I just came back from Scotland with my family about 2 weeks ago, having sent my daughter to the universities of Edinburgh. While in Scotland, in Edinburgh, I was so delighted. That's where I discovered that one of my idol, Adam Smith, he was actually from Edinburgh, and his house was there. And so happened I saw the house and all that. Yeah. See, I like to believe that the invisible hands of Adam Smith refers not just to the power of productivity, but also to the wisdoms of achieving inner equilibrium. This concept goes beyond the world of capitalism. In your new world as a global citizen, you would only excel at things that you are passionate about and which makes you truly happy. I'm sure you heard this. If you have heard this, I'm telling you again, do something that you like. Live your own dreams and not the dreams of your parents. Live your own dreams and not the dreams of your parents. And this will, I assure you, will bring you some inner peace. For when human beings, when we are at peace with ourselves, when we accept the totality of who we truly are, then can we become more successful than we ever imagined. In order to live our dreams, we kind of sometimes have to go through a lot of awkward moments to live with yourself. These sort of awkward steps of identifying and solidifying your dreams. Last week, I was in Shanghai attending the global board meeting of Nestle. And the worldwide chairman of Nestle, Mr. Peter Brabeck, he actually made a speech, and he openly encourages all the CEOs of Nestle to make more mistakes, because as through making mistakes, we discover who we really are. Steve Jobs, at 30 years old, he was left devastated and desperate after being, it's like being fired from a company that you formed. Albert Einstein, he wasn't able to speak until he was almost 4 years old. And the list goes on and on. Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, the Beatles. Right? So, do stay true to your own passion and explore the real possibilities within your imaginations. Not everyone can be the next Steve Jobs, but you can be the next you. And that is more meaningful than blindly trying to copycat somebody, trying to emulate someone. Be a magician. Do you have a university degree in INT that say that this guy is going to graduate in Bachelor's of Magician? No, but he became a successful magician. I was so entertained. Look at the way, the confidence that he showed, the language that he used. The world that we're living in is about content. We spend that 10 minutes having enjoyed the time that this young man brought for us. Success is not really about having a proper job titles and all that. In the real world, as in the world of art, no one wants a copycat. The value is always in the original. Spend some time trying to think about what your authentic self is going to be. Well, that's my proposals on the 5 pathways that we would take in order to become a global citizens. And if you may, I'd like to quickly just recap. Reject extremism, become a masters of technology, lead with integrity, collaborate rather than compete, and finally, embrace authentic self. In your future endeavors, no matter what you choose to do, I guarantee that you'll be rewarded both socially and spiritually, and in fact, hopefully even financially, if you become a person that has a global mindset. Allow me to add one quick word of advice based on my personal experience. Please do not allow yourself to become a blind slave or worshippers of money, stature, or titles. Money, statures, and titles. I am very, very conscious and very that the moment should one day I decide to leave my current positions, all these are gone. I'm here with red carpet because of what the company stands for. Right? The moment I'm no longer with the company, I'm just a layman in the streets. And that's not the legacy that I want to leave behind. The legacy that I want to leave behind is not because of what the company has done, but it's what I personally have stood for. Titles, money, and statures, all this one day would end up in the rubbish heap of history. And the reputations of integrity is far more important and lasting. Well, my real hope today in this speech is not that you would use it to exploit the world, the globalization's opportunities offered by the new globalized world, but rather, if, 800 students here today, if 10%, that's 80 of us, here could do the same thing for others, or hopefully 20%, I think you do what you can do to make this world a better place. I think the time that we spent together this morning would have been fruitful. Now, an American author first used this famous poem in the 1930s for religious purposes. And he says, if you were to look at the world that we live in today, is actually the accents resonates even more. How do you find the serenity to accept things that you cannot change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference? And how exactly do you do that? For some, I think the answer is to look inwardly, while for many, trying to find some external powers to help you. Well, I'm sure that you would find a way that would one day build your own legacy. So, ladies and gentlemen, go for it. Good luck. Thank you.